All right, welcome everybody. You know, God willing, we're live, and you see us. There's five of us on the screen, and yeah, I see Mikail has commented. Jeff's is a NSN number one Marvel fan. Thank you for coming. Um, Thank you for spending the weekend on Comic Art Live, the ninth version or the ninth go around. It's been a lot of fun. This is the last panel on the last day, which is where the real stuff happens. We have basically no time limit except for when people want to leave. Um, so we can talk and run on sentences. We can do whatever we want. That's what Indie's all about. So the important thing is Mikail is here as co-host, and I'll just call him expert. You know, when people call people geniuses, but they're idiots, are they allowed to call people geniuses? You ever wonder about that? But Mikail, I'm going to call him an expert, even though I'm not an expert. He's an absolute lover of the comic book medium and dives deep into new and emerging talent. He's been very helpful to comic art fans. He's given me a lot of recommendations. In fact, I think he recommended this to me last year. If I think he did, he should have. If he didn't, there it is. Yes.
All the cool kids have a copy.
Yeah. I've got Lewandowski and Nir Levy here next to me too. And what we're here mostly for is to talk about the wonderful world of comic books. And, the broad category is indie or underground creators. These guys can correct us and let us know if they even want to be designated. But Sean, if we can start with you, just
Sure.
real quick. And then, guys, we just talk about whatever we want to talk about. But just to set some groundwork and context, I pronounce it Athenaeum. I'm wrong, right?
You're right. Athenaeum is how I pronounce it, though, because I named it after my daughter Athena. So I pronounce it wrong. I like picking the hardest thing to spell and say for my business. It seemed like a smart idea at the time.
Athena.
Athenium.
Oh my God.
Athenium.
Say again.
Athenium.
Athenaeum. Thank you. Well, she wins. Her pronunciation is absolutely correct. I don't know how old your group is, but for me, you kind of emerged kind of whole cloth all of a sudden with this unbelievable roster of artists, which does not happen overnight. So could you tell us a little bit about your group and how you came to be, and I guess a little bit of your own history, because clearly you had a lot of history to be able to put a group like this together.
Sure, I'll do the truncated version, and I'm glad that it appeared that we started as a fully formed idea. So long story short, love comics my entire life. Wanted to be an artist when I was younger, and realized I wasn't very good. I think a lot of us, as we get older into our later teens, maybe we pause comics for a bit. I had a bit of a pause. And when I came back to them in my late 20s, reading Marvel, DC, Image, etc., I started to dabble into more independent comics, just out of wanting to see something a little bit different, and perhaps getting a little bit tired of what was being presented over and over again. And so I dove into that world. And at the same time, I had a mentor that was really interested in collecting original art. And I had no idea that was a thing that you could do. And I always, covered my room with posters of from Wizard magazine and Nintendo Power and things like that. And so the idea that I could buy art was really compelling to me. And so I started collecting, and as I was collecting, I also had my first kid. I didn't have a lot of money. And so trying to buy, Green Lantern pages, even when I started, it was expensive for someone who didn't have a lot of money. And so while I was digging into indie world, I realized you could buy art directly from artists. And in those spaces, it was far cheaper. And so I really got addicted to being able to support their art directly. And I created a lot of good friendships with folks that I bought pages from over the years. During the pandemic, I connected with a local artist, Casey Nowak. They were about to sell their art over Twitter. And I said, hey, would you like me to sell your art for you? I'll do it for free. Thinking that they would say, you're a crazy person. You have no, like, I don't know your background. I don't know, if you can do this. But they said yes. And very quickly, Athenaeum was born as just a Twitter handle. And I was just talking to folks this weekend at TCAF. I think we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later, about how folks didn't know like what to think of Athenaeum at the beginning. Like, is this a legit thing? Is this someone who's just going to steal my money? And it took a bit of word of mouth and kind of growing and getting some of the artists that I had collected from, Tilly Walden was one of the first kind of big names that I got, where I had to very quickly figure out like how a business works and, get insurance and have a website and things like that. And over the past almost 3 years, it's exploded into this really cool group of artists, two of which are here today, that I'm really proud to represent. And a large part of the mission of Athenaeum is supporting artists and helping them continue to do the work. I'm sure folks in the audience know that cartoonists are not paid as much as they probably should be. Using original art as a way to directly support artists is something that I just love being part of. So that's a little bit of my journey.
So pandemic launch, just like I can feel a little bit better because I think that's why I missed it. I missed it until only about a year ago. And of course, two of the artists at Athenaeum are here today, Charles and Sam. And guys, and this is the obligatory part of the programming. If you can just say hello and a little bit about yourselves, and then we can dive into your works.
You want to go first, Sam?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Sam, and I make my own, mainly self-published, heavy black and white graphic comics. And I also do a lot of band flyers, and I try to incorporate comics into like a lot of the illustration work I do, whether it be for any other like outlet, if it is a flyer for a band or a poster for something, or I've collaborated with the Academy Museum here in LA before. And I also work as a character designer in animation on The Simpsons, and I've freelanced on some other shows. But the animation is the day job, and the comics is the all-night job and weekend job. So yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm Charles Glaubitz. I born in Tijuana, raised in Rosarito Beach, so I'm in Mexico. Just the northern part of Mexico that bunches up right up to California, SoCal, San Diego. My father's German American, mother's Mexican, so I grew up reading American comic books. I think my first reading language was in English, not in Spanish. And since I was a kid, I drew comics. I was interested in superhero comic books, G.I. Joe, Spider-Man, Hulk. And then I wanted to get something close to do that has anything to do with as close as I could actually back then in the mid-90s, and it was graphic design at San Diego. So I started graphic design and met an illustrator who did editorial, and back then I think he did a lot of corporate work. So I went to study illustration at California College of Arts, and then when I came back, I didn't want to be an illustrator, nor did I want to be a designer. I wanted to be an artist. And I started doing, I guess around the early 2000s, it was the beginning of the Juxtapose. I forgot whatever tag name they gave that type of art, lowbrow. So I started doing lowbrow here in Tijuana. I came back to Tijuana. And Vid started off a career as a fine artist until that ended, and then ended up with a lot of work that was influenced by comic books, and that it's the work in itself told this large story, and decided to take that story and make those into comic books. And I think the first comic book I did was in 2010. It was called The Crystal Sigil. I've never done something that was sequential, and it was I don't know, third month in. I think I was high. I was probably high, drinking tequila at 3 a.m, and shoulder pain, wrist pain, hand pain, everything hurt. And I'm asking myself, as I'm taking a shot, why the hell am I putting myself through this struggle? And then kind of like in a movie, it's like you go from the present to the past. So there was little me in my mind telling myself, because you want to make comic books. That's why you draw. And I just started bawling. And I think having that experience where my first true wish child was so powerful, and I said, I just gotta make comics. And then The Crystal Sigil got a good response, noted comic book by American Best Comics in 2012. And it was like, okay, people are responding to this really fast. So this might be an actual pristine wish, a child's wish would it's much more, I think at that time, and I still do, it's much more powerful than some 50-year-old wish I can make right now. And I started making comics, and then I've had work before with oh my god, I'm gonna brain fart, with the art director from designer from Fantagraphics, Jacob Kobe. And I asked him, dude, I'm working on this comic book and I need you to design it. I have no money. I will pay you with art. And he's like, sure, awesome. And then he didn't tell me and showed that to Eric Reynolds from Fantagraphics. Let's print this. And that's how I started doing comics. Yeah. And I've done 3 volumes of Starseeds through Fantagraphics and some other self-published works.
Eric Reynolds has good taste. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a good artist too. I bought a piece from him 20 years ago, a ODB piece, a portrait piece.
He's a fabulous inker. He actually inked a spread from Starseeds too.
Oh. And Starseeds has 3. There's 3 now.
volumes.
Yeah. 3. The third one came out end of last year or something, yeah?
Yeah.
Man, I got to get those. Mikail, please.
The first thing I've got to do is refute everything Kasra said about me as the show started.
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but I'm a fan, and I think I came upon a moment later in my life where, like Charles, I started sobbing and said, I just want to read comics. And, I have always had a pile of books, in the queue. And then once you start digging into comics and particularly the indie scene, you can build another queue of just, a wild assortment of ideas and stories that I find really push beyond. If you talk about the cradle for all of us being the simpler sequential stories that we grew up with, the newspaper strips, and then graduating on to Marvel and DC and getting those stories, but then moving beyond that, I was always blown away by how much can be conveyed through the medium in different forms. And Charles, when I was reading Starseeds, it's like immersing yourself into a primordial ooze and just witnessing things happen. And that was, one of the things I really responded to in the book. And I was excited to hear about the Comic-Con Museum exhibit that's coming up of your work. I'm in San Diego as well, so I'll have an opportunity to really give that a look. And similarly, Sam, I think when you start to dig into comic books and the process behind them, and the channel we're addressing is primarily the people who collect the physical art that's used to produce these comics, you realize how there are unsung artists in every facet of our lives. Everything we look at, there's a designer, hopefully, behind that, helping you through the process and the journey. So when I discovered comic art, and then I saw Sean and Athenaeum start up, and I loved Kasra's little springing, fully formed metaphor there, because that is what it is. When you look at Sean's work, the artist that he represents, and the amount of art on the website, it differs so wildly from artist to artist that it's a feast for the mind, because it's I don't know, I'm still learning so much about how the comics are made and what you want us to see. So these are the things that brought me into your books and the work that you guys are doing. And I was just curious, how did you guys, Sean, Sam, and Charles, how do you kind of relate your early reading of comics to the work that you do now, if at all?
Well, for me, I feel like it's all the early comics that I read are totally from what I've told, and I can even see it myself, like they come through in the stuff I make now. I mean, like, I don't think I realized it at the time, because there's so many things that, especially when you're younger, you'll read them and you're absorbing it, and then you don't look at it for so many years sometimes because you discover other things. And when you go back and revisit it, you're like, oh my God, I can totally see that that's in my DNA of what I draw, and it's just there, and it's just like through osmosis. I didn't even realize it came out that way. And for me, there's so many comics like that. Like one of my earliest the two comics that just immediately right now come to mind for me was I read Sam and Max and Bone. And I feel like I stepped away from those for so many years. And I look at them now and I'm like, I can see that both of those like merged together. So like I read Bone in black and white, and that I mainly draw in black and white, and all the little detail and nitty gritty stuff of the Sam and Max comics are come through somehow. And there's so many others and everything I picked up along the way. But I just feel like whatever was there that laying the foundation for me when I was younger is still there, alive somehow, and everything else just adds on top. And then it's great when you combine it all and just it's spit out through your filter, and it just something new is created. I hope that answers your question.
Well, okay. Oh man, I think I went to so many different phases in my life that I think that I come from more like from when I studied at art school. I discovered Joseph Campbell and mythologies and archetypes, and then I discovered Jung, and then that led me to Jodorowsky, and then Jodorowsky led me to Moebius, and it kind of like went into a circle. But it was these guys who talked about stories, and so I was interested in stories. I was interested about the possibility of a new mythology, a new story that it's subversive to the main stories that have created our reality. And I think it came off really, really snob at the beginning, and then the thing that really changed me and put me like in the direction of making comics was this talk at San Diego Comic Con with Grant Morrison and Deepak Chopra, and they were talking about the 7 rules of superheroes or something like that. And Grant Morrison was just going off on Jack Kirby's New Gods, which up to that point I've never read, and I always, like everybody else, found Jack Kirby's art really wonky. But how he was explaining that Kirby was trying to create this new mythology. He killed the old gods because he knew the old gods didn't serve us anymore as a mythology or as a story that would lead us to a different place. And I bought New Gods. It was a shitty black and white grayscale copy, the cheapest one I could buy. and I was blown away by Kirby's art, but more so by his writing. I thought his writing was, you know, like very William Blake, very mythopoetic, very moving, and then his art slowly began to seep into my art, and then his solo work is what I've always been focused on, because it's such a clear and different voice. It's indie comics within the mainframe of mainstream comics. I think that's the fourth word. That's what that is. And I think I've just been trying to do the same thing, create a huge story that is hard to read, harder to understand. I mean, it's complex, and that it's open to interpretation. I think that's one of the things that if you guys go back to reread New Gods as opposed to Fantastic Four, the idioms of the language is more transcendent to time than, say, the ones written by Stan Lee, and that's just the poetic, the mythopoetic language. So if there's something I'm trying to run along is to Kirby, which is a hard thing to do, but
it definitely comes across in your work. I think, especially in Starseeds, the creation process and the journey of becoming a god. It was, for me at least, the only character that came with its own backstory, to me at least, was the Jaguar God King character. But it was, and even he was fresh, because you didn't tell us anything about him. That was my own interpretation just on his appearance, on their appearance. So I was very curious to see where this would go and how it would tie in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think now that I think about saying that, I think I get that from manga, where things are, right. There's no explanations, or if there's little explanations. It's specifically something that the more I think about it, it's my work's also influenced by manga. It's influenced by Berserk. It's influenced by Tekken King Creed. So there's just these ideas that just exist. These rules and ideas of these universes and these characters are already there, and there's no need to explain who they are. But as you progress with the story, who they are, or who you want, or what you, not who they are, but what you project into them, because they're supposed to be opened, is who they become. So the idea is for them to become something different to everybody who reads the book. And I think I kind of get that a little bit from Berserk. And it's just like this long, very long format comic book. We're barely at the end, going into the final chapters, you realize that who Guts really is, and I've seen throughout little spots of who he is, what makes him who he was in the past, but it's not clearly defined. It's something that the viewer puts together from his anguished life, I think.
Do you guys think that there's a barrier of entry into indie comics? I feel like every artist talks about the feeling compelled to create them, but then there's that nitty-gritty process of getting the work out there and getting it in front of people. And I was curious to hear from Sean about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival that you just returned from. What was your impression of that event, and the way that they're putting forward independent comic book artists?
It's kind of a way of life in Toronto. I mean, it's such a city that celebrates comics of all kinds. They just had stamps released for 4 Canadian cartoonists. The 2 that I remember off the top of my head are Seth and Jillian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki. And they had these. Oh, go ahead.
I just sorry, Chester Brown and some other.
Oh, Chester Brown, that's right. And they had a huge ceremony for it. They had the giant versions of the stamps in this the reference library that the show's at. You can go on my social media, and I have some pictures and videos. It's this beautiful space. It's 3 floors, just gorgeous. And the entire time that I was there, the place was just packed. And it's not people milling about, it's new folks just constantly flowing into that space. And it's like the energy is so positive and it's so celebratory, and you can the artists are so, it's so easy to connect with them. You know, most of my experience with mainstream conventions has been at like Baltimore Comic Con, which I love. I love Baltimore Comic Con. But I imagine small press conventions are much more aligned with what cons used to be, when they were solely about the celebration of the medium and really being able to connect with the folks that you love, to the point where, you know, there's lines for folks, but it's nothing compared to, you know, some of the bigger shows and the bigger names. You know, some of these legends you can have a half-hour conversation with, you know. So TCAF is one of my favorite shows, period. But I think, you know, to your point around the barrier to entry, you know, I think in the States, comics historically haven't been looked at in the same way that, you know, maybe in Europe or Japan, right? Where it's not just for kids, it's for everybody, right? And I honestly believe that we're in a golden age of comics right now. You can find a comic that connects with you and any sort of identity that you have, experience that you have. Someone is making a comic book about it. And I think part of the barrier is just, you know, small indie press. It doesn't have the same marketing power as a Marvel or a DC or an Image, or these spaces that are able to make movies and other things related to it. And, you know, a lot of us, I was a kid of the 90s, right? And Image was exploding, and we were all, you know, putting our comics in plastic sleeves with backing boards because we were going to, you know, sell our comics and pay for college with them at some point. Didn't pan out so well. But that's all I saw. I grew up in northern New York, in a very, very tiny town, more cows than human beings. And there wasn't much exposure to the plenty of indie comics that existed at that time. I had no idea. And the comics that I had heard of, like Love and Rockets, is so intimidating for someone who hasn't jumped in a comic that started in the early 80s and continues to this day. It's really hard. Even when people say, just pick any volume and you can jump right in. I'm, you know, as a completist, you're like, I don't know about that. And I think part of it is just, you know, you need the right friend, or you need the right mentor. You need someone to say, hey, you like Batman. Have you read this? Right? This, that, you know, not to diminish the love that you have for mainstream comics at all. I wear a Green Lantern ring every day of my life, right? Like I love my roots and where I connect with comics. It's just that I wish that folks knew more about these spaces that exist, that are doing really exciting work, where folks are pushing the boundaries of what comics can be. I truly believe that comics as a medium is so unique in that you can tell a story using visuals and words in a way that you can't with film, in a way that you can't with books. Right? You can do something really, really special. And we're seeing that now, right? The Toronto Comics Art Festival, just the diversity of folks who are publishing their own, you know, self-published comics about, you know, all sorts of different things. It's so exciting. And just being able to go through that space and pick up the things that you think look interesting, right? Those physical spaces don't exist as much. I imagine that some folks who are watching this may not even have a comic shop near them anymore, right? And so I'm really interested in the project of not only original art, but getting folks to read new things. One of the most exciting things to me about Athenaeum is that when someone comes to look at Charles's art, they may see Sam's and say, what is that? That's so that looks amazing. I want to go read that comic now. And that's how these spaces grow, is just by talking about them.
Mm-hmm. Do you go to Small Press Expo, Sean?
Yeah, actually, that was the first indie con I went. I lived 20 minutes away from SPX for many years, and it was one of those things where I didn't even know it existed until a couple of years before I moved, and I was like, why do people not tell me about comics things?
Exactly the same. I lived in Rockville.
Oh, okay.
And,
yeah.
And then I know you were up at Hopkins. I was working in Rockville with a biotech company, and it was years. I didn't go until like I lived there for like 8 years before I went, like in 2004, 5, or 6. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite shows as well, and it's neat because they'll partner with the Library of Congress. I don't know if folks know, but the Library of Congress, you probably know, has the original art to Amazing Fantasy 15, and anybody can go. You just need to get like an ID card there. You can do it all on the same day as long as you make an appointment. You can go and see these original pages, and I'll tell. I'm this like indie snob right at this point, like primarily read indie comics. And so I was like, well, I'm here. I live here. It'd be silly not to go see these original pages. And so, I just thought I'd go up and check them out. And I swear it was like a religious experience. I seeing the notes, Stan Lee's notes on the side of the pages, and seeing where Ditko ignored them, and having the person, the curator, talk about kind of the relationship to the art, as well as I hadn't read Amazing Fantasy 15 in forever, and forgetting that it's just one story in that comic, the Spider-Man story. There are other stories there. It's the full comic minus the cover. It's just something so beautiful about the origins, arguably the origins of a lot of the things that we love today. So the long way of saying SPX is really cool, and they get a lot of interesting exhibits and folks that come to that each year.
And guys, just while we're on the topic, if you don't mind, and selfishly, I want to kind of reboot and update my brain. What are the shows that you like to go to related to comics? For whatever reason, it's next door, or it's just one that has always been around, or it addresses the sort of content that you'd like to see and want and absorb. What comes to your mind? Like, TCAF and SPX, got it.
There used to be one in LA, Los Angeles Comics Arts, which died during the pandemic, and then they didn't have been doing it again. And I had done that, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row. And it was always great. I mean, the energy was always great. There's a lot of people. There's always, you would get the oldies, myself, and you get younger artists and the really, really young artists. And I think I really liked that. I thought that was a really awesome festival.
Do you know, Charles, I'm sorry, do you know how many years that ran before it died during the pandemic?
2016.
Yeah, that's right.
19, no, 20? Okay. 1920?
I don't know. Was it in 2020? I can't remember. I don't think so.
Nobody remembers 2020.
Yeah, no.
It's a fever dream.
Yeah. Or 2014, maybe. I think it had run 6 years.
2019 was the last one, I think. Okay. I think so.
Were you there, Sam?
Yeah, 2019 was the year I tabled it, because before, I think I tabled twice. I can't remember, but I was at the 2019 one. But the first one ever I volunteered at, so I was helping set it up, just because I was so excited when I heard that it was coming about, because there was no comic show like that before. I mean, there's LA Zine Fest, which I loved. So when I moved to LA, I thought LA Zine Fest was great, because it was, there's a ton of zines, which are awesome, and there were a ton of comics, but just a solely focused comic show because there were others that were not indie focused, but that was the first one that I could think of, at least in 10 years, right? So yeah,
I would do pretty well, and then reinvest half of what I made a day into buying stuff.
Yes,
and,
yeah, me too.
It was fabulous. secret headquarters would have these secret stash that they don't sell. That's I think Rob Sato, who was with me, who went to school at the same time. He was there the last year, and the last year they had two curators from the George Lucas Museum were walking around, looking at comic art.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine told me, it's like, dude, you should. I told this guy about you, and he's coming to your table. And luckily, I had a beat up copy of a self-published art book that I had, a Starseeds art book, and I gave it to him. And a year later, they contacted me and they bought some stuff for their Latin American collection.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
similarly to Comic Arts LA, I loved Comic Arts Brooklyn because I'm from the East Coast, and I went to that. I don't think I was at the first one, but I think the second one they did, I think it was still the Brooklyn Comic Arts and Graphics Festival. And then I went to every one till I moved to LA. I was still in school then. I didn't table there until I moved to LA. Then I would fly back to table there. But that show was also incredible. The Brooklyn and LA ones were my favorite ones. But I also love Mice. That's still going on in Boston. Yeah. And that one I try to go to anytime I can get a table there, which I've done 3 times, I think. And I think that one's another really nice, not as big as I think LA or Brooklyn, but it's a really great show that's also, it just feels very cozy.
How about Cake in Chicago? You guys
I've never done that. I haven't.
I had been invited, accepted. They oh, we love your work, blah blah blah. And then I had some economics that money had to go someplace else other than to the trip, and I had to cancel. So I never made it up to Chicago. And I was really pretty bummed about it.
It went away for a few years, and it came back last year after a couple years being gone, and this year they're trying to fundraise. So if folks are interested in it, it's a good show. I think I only went after pandemic, so I don't know what it was like before. But from what I understood, I mean, Chicago is like a real indie comics town. It's a big community, and it used to be this huge event. And I think they're trying to build it back up after, how these shows, when folks leadership changes, things move on. You go through a horrifying pandemic. It's hard to kind of get on your feet again, especially with these small press shows.
Sure.
I've also been to Mocha in New York, and I've been to Comics Arts.
Mocha is amazing.
Arts Festival once. That was my first festival in the East Coast. First time in New York, and the first time I printed all the self-published books. So I had like 6 boxes, 6 heavy boxes that I had to lunge around and Uber X to the hostel where I was staying. The festival is awesome. People were awesome. It's kind of sucks that it's one day, because if that went on for 2 or 3 days, that would be crazy. I mean, Comics Arts Festival was 3 days. It was 2018, I think, 17.
Okay, yeah, that's the one I was at too.
No, it was actually 19. Starseeds 2 had come out on that year. So it was 2019.
Oh, 2019. Okay.
2019. Oh, yeah, 2019. And it was just fabulous. I think walking around, it's like, okay, I got to go walk around, and you see people's art and be like, oh my God. Just the indie art world is much more akin to manga, where you have all these themes that people write about and make art about and make comics about. And then, it goes from superheroes to slice of life to really underground Bukowski, low-level life experience and whatnot. And I think, to me, that's why I gravitate towards indie comics, just because it's not to say I love superhero comics. I still read superhero comics. I don't read as much superhero comics. but I read more indie comics now, and I read more manga just because the themes or the stories are, they're much wider to choose from.
Mhm.
There's one that I started reading about this little cat that my daughter loves, and it's a manga about a cute little cat, and it's a cute little story. And you read it, and it's like reminds me of Bone, but it's not adventurous as Bone. Uh, so yeah, indie comics. I think it's so many different worlds and universes exist in that field.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry.
I
I was
know,
just going to
please.
say one thing that is not synonymous with indie comics, but I want to mention is that obviously the one that everyone knows about, which is San Diego Comic Con, that I've been going to since I moved to LA, and I've been tabling now for I think about 5 years. But the reason why I mention it is because that actually is the first place that I, like 10 years ago when I started going, saw indie comic art for sale, like at tables. And that's why I want to ask Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, that you want to start potentially tabling at places with selling indie comic art, which I think is, I don't know whether you're planning on that but I think that's great because other than San Diego, I haven't really seen that elsewhere, especially at smaller shows. And I love the idea of that because I think people love seeing the original art in person, and people don't really go to San Diego for that, even though it is there, it finds its audience. But I think people would love to see that at smaller shows, but you would know more about that than me.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. I'd love to start tabling more. It may be odd to folks that go to mainstream conventions, but in the indie space, art reps aren't really a thing as much. I think at some
Sure.
of historically at some of the older shows at one point it was more common, but it's actually hard for me to get into those shows because they really want to focus on the artists, and so it's something that I put in the chat. I helped start my own small press show, kind of out of similarly to like how I live my life. If something's not working out, I'll just build it myself. And so I built a small press show in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Last year we had Jaime Hernandez, Jillian Tamaki, Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This year we have it's another good year of headliners as well. I can table at the show that I create, but I also have aspirations to table at places like Heroes Con. I almost did this year, but we're going on a trip to Paris for a comics festival. And San Diego, I know a lot of the artists I work with attend San Diego. And there's actually an exciting announcement that I think is going to happen tomorrow that I can't talk about just yet, but you'll see it, and think of Athenaeum when you see it.
It's exciting.
We haven't shown any art yet.
Ugh.
Shame on us. So there's a few. There's just a few here from both of you all, Sam and Charles. It's on the screen. We can talk about what you like. You can talk about this if you like. I honestly want to talk about. I want to talk about this. Freaking love this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
And,
that was. Oh, yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh no, please. Yeah, please.
No, that was. It's funny because I was Zine Panic, which is a really cool French comic anthology. I was going to contribute a different comic to them, but because I put that comic out myself, I self-published it. They were like, "Can you do something else fairly quickly?" And I had these cookie characters for a while now because I made a T-shirt during COVID and just drew these characters. And I was like, the theme is food, and I wanted to do something with these characters for a while. So it just kind of worked out right away. They're like, okay, I'll make a 4-page comic with these characters, and the theme is food already. So yeah, I put that together, and it was fun because I was just about to work on the long comic that I finished literally this morning. I sent to the printer, which is 80 pages, and I did that one on paper because the comic prior to that was the first time I did a digital comic, and I didn't enjoy the experience as much. So this also served as my chance to get back to inking fully on paper before I start the 80-page comic. So yeah, that's the little backstory of this, and hopefully I can continue this because this is like a small little to be continued story that I wrote out in my head, but not beyond that just yet.
Yeah, I think someone we know, Dan T, owns the 4 pages of this story.
Oh yeah, he was super nice. He messaged me about it and he really connected with it, and I was happy about that because I was having a lot of fun with this one.
And I think Sean, you may have sent this one along. This is a holiday card image. I'm not sure what that means, but
Oh, that's yeah. So for the past 10 years, every year I just do an illustrated holiday card just for fun. At first it was for friends and I started mailing it out to people. And then as Instagram grew, it was like, who wants a free holiday card? And then it just grew to like 200 people. So it started as like, this is a cheap little fun thing. And now it's like, oh, I'm mailing out 200 cards. It's like expensive, but it's fine. I've already set in that path, so I'm happy to do it. But after that, I never even considered like, wait, maybe someone will want to own the art of the card, and maybe that can offset the cost of mailing out 200, 300 free holiday cards. So I that's how I actually partnered with Sean over a year ago, which that holiday card art we put up and sold it, I think that same day or whatever. So this is from this past year, and I'm going to continue.
Yeah, I think the
doing
2017 card. I think, Sean, you have the 2017 card up on your site and available. Okay, that's very cool. And then Rick and Morty.
Yeah, that not my characters, but it was a really fun opportunity to draw Rick and Morty characters however I wanted. And they were so nice that they let me do whatever I want. Like they just said it has to be noir because that's what the comic is about. But the setting I made up, I like diners and I liked heavy black and white stuff. I did color it, but digitally. But but it was cool. They said I could be off model, and I love that. I love when I can take characters and just draw them however I want. So that was a really fun experience.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure you can't go off model too much with The Simpsons, right?
No, not on the show. Certainly not. I wish that I could have done a Simpsons comic because they were so liberal in letting people draw the characters however they wanted, but sadly they shut down. So that didn't happen, but this is still awesome that I got to play with these guys. And I just finished a second one that hopefully will be out, I think August. I'm not sure. But
Thank you.
It's so terrible of you to show comic art and my budget's already blown. Like I'm sitting here looking at these amazing pages.
But we live in a wonderful world where the credit card companies send us envelopes every single day. Because
I do accept payments, so we try and make it happen. And it just at that point, like, I think it's really important for art to be accessible price wise. And so one of the things I talk to my artists about is, are there opportunities for us to find pages that may be less expensive, sketches, things like that can really get folks, fans to be able to have the art. Because I remember where I started and I couldn't afford anything. I would have loved any sketch on a napkin to support folks. So I think it's really important, and I understand that some artists don't feel like they want to share some of those pages that aren't published or whatever, but our collector addict nature is going to connect us to the art, and we see art differently than artists, I think.
Charles
and Sam, do you guys collect art? Do you trade with other artists?
Well, all this stuff behind me, my whole walls are full of original art and prints and stuff, so I definitely do. And I agree with everything Sean said. Like, I'll want any kind of sketch on even a napkin or anything.
Definitely, you always get either people ask you or ask me. I'm like, sure, I'm always open for trade. Or when I see somebody I admire, and everybody's like, I think most artists are open to trade art because it's not an easy gig, right? So I think everybody's very compassionate and just to have somebody like what you're doing, is so important. So yeah, I trade art. I buy art when I have money. It happens sometimes. I will straight up just buy a piece. It's like, okay, well, how much is that? I got money. I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it goes around. It comes back.
Yeah.
So we just have a few pieces of Charles' work here as well, and Charles, please, if there's something you'd like to say or help us out with, Sean, Charles, I don't know the source of this image. I'm not certain of it.
Okay. I had a student of mine who I started working with. It's called Rat Nest Sticker Company. And he distributes my self-published comics, and he's like, I need to make I want to make a poster. Sell me something, and I'm not going to sell you anything. You helped me out a lot. So let me find an image I want to do. So I went back. He was a student of mine for an illustration class that I taught at San Diego City College. So I went back into my sketchbook and pulled out this piece that I did for as a class demo, and just redid it in black and white because he was printing it with black and white. Plus, I'm into black and white, so I just redid the image from a sketch that I had, and it became a poster for a Rat Nest sticker company.
And anyone who wants like a longer form interview with Charles, Rat Nest podcast, look up with Charles' name on YouTube, and there's a great talk that they had together. And here we go to Kirby.
Yeah, one of the things that as artists commissions, it's like, okay, I'm going to open commissions, and I've been commissioned just like twice, which I'm kind of surprised, but at the same time, well, I'm just surprised, like, oh, okay, nobody wants to commission me. But that was like, I did that specifically as my promo piece for commissions a couple of years back. And I'm still waiting to be, people ask for commissions, and it's still up there at the Athenaeum. And I think in my head I was going to go through this whole Kirby pantheon of just doing these drawings or my interpretations of his characters, but making comics just takes all my time away. I'm focused on doing. So Star Seeds books are 250 pages a pop, and that's 2 or 3 years. So I hardly have any chance to do things on the side other than those books. And most of those books are, and I've told Sean this, most of my physical art is very limited because I've worked before in digital, and then I get tired of digital, and that's when I teach myself how to solve things with ink. And in this new book that I'm doing, it's going to be all hand-drawn, inked art. And Sean's been like, "Okay, you're not going to send me any of those?" And no, not until I'm done with the book, because I need to hold it out. And the previous image of the character in that flower bed, he's from the new book that's coming out. I put it up on Instagram, and a collector who has bought work directly from Sean contacted me. I'm like, okay, do you want to buy art? You have to contact Sean. He's my dealer. And I didn't have any problem letting go because I needed the money. But that's the first art that I've sold from this new batch that I'm doing.
Charles, could you talk a little bit about? I feel like, well, this is one of my favorite images, but I feel like your art kind of pops off the page. Like it feels three-dimensional often, and I'm curious. I'm sure that's purposeful, but I'd love to hear you talk about sort of, the process of making your pages and thinking about spaces. You're working in a sort of 2D space. But somehow you are kind of making things look so dynamic, and there's so much sort of motion. And I don't know. I don't know if this is a good question, but I'd be curious to hear you talk about kind of how you think about those pages and those compositions.
Well, I'm influenced by Jack Kirby, who was like awesome at spotting blacks and dynamic pages and abstract ways of interjecting dynamism into a page. But I'm also influenced a lot by Mike Mignola, where he plays with these blacks over white, over black, over white to create these depth in the art. And most of these, like this, for example, this was fully fleshed out digitally. And then I'm going to ink that because I was not confident enough, nor had I developed the ability to do it by hand.
Wait, so do you mean that you penciled it, digitally printed it, and inked it on top of it?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because didn't have the ability to go from the digital, where you can make it really big, to when you go to something that's like physical. It's like I would do this to the page and like
I've done that.
Yeah. And I did, like, for most of the other books, there's like 30% of them have digital art, and the other stuff, I mean, not digital, analog, and the other stuff is digital. And up until the end of doing the final book, the last Starseeds, I have 70 pages that's done ink by hand. And I was so proud a couple of days ago because I finally didn't do this in the computer. It's like I did a rough sketch of a pyramid and the inside of the pyramid, and then I got on my table. I put some tape over here, put some tape over there, grabbed the rule, and actually rolled it out by hand and sketched the whole idea by hand. I'm like, there it is. It clicked. Finally, can sit down on a blank piece of paper and do the whole drawing process instead of going through digital. But digital just makes it much faster. So,
and your eyes feel better though when you're not doing digital too.
Yeah.
These pages look incredible, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, your pages, you're playing with the black and white. I was just like, oh my god.
That's what I'm thinking about yours. But thanks.
To me, this is like, and this is a joke. I'm just having fun. Like, this is how you look at like a plate of eggs. Like, I imagine this is how you see the world. It's amazing. Wow. I don't normally covet things. Sometimes the art ownership thing is a bit odd, right? But this piece, I have like a feeling of, I would actually genuinely like to own this. And
I was thinking the same thing. I want to own it too.
As one of the first, it's actually 2 pages, and we sold that instantly.
So good.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna stop there, and we officially have 1 minute until I'm supposed to go out for Thai food to celebrate the end of Comic Art Live. But I'm happy to stay as long as you guys like. Mikail, you must have something else you want to talk about.
I mean, we could go another hour easily. I'd be really curious to hear briefly just about what is self-publishing like nowadays. I was, a couple of years ago, I heard, Kickstarter is now the largest book publisher in the world. It's curious to hear about all these new avenues coming out. There's still problems, working with different platforms, but I would be curious to hear how you guys approach it and what that process is like for you guys.
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I really like it. I mean, I love, the process for me has always been fairly easy. I mean, I've been doing it, I guess, even if you consider like back in college, like stapling comics and setting up at just some little random show. But like since then, like getting them professionally printed on a service and everything online. And I find the whole thing very easy. And I love the aspect of it because I actually really like going to comic conventions. And I like that, you can bring your books and sell them, and you're selling them directly to your audience or people that connect with it. And, they find you and they come to your table. And even at a place like San Diego Comic-Con, like where I wouldn't normally fit in, like you think people do think of it as superhero, centric, or maybe not even comic centric anymore, but there every year, like, and I still do it every year. There's a surprising amount of people that come to the table because I don't know, it just stands out. It's black and white and it doesn't fit in there. But that's why I like doing as many different shows as possible, all different types, because there's always going to be someone who sees it, even if it's one person that likes it. And I like that, you know, you printed it yourself, you made it yourself. It's like a little project. It kind of, for me, it reminds me of just what I've been doing my whole life, even in second grade, making paper little comics. It's just like, you're able to make this thing yourself. I mean, that's why I even got into comics over animation when I was younger, because I went to school for comics, not animation, because how do you make animation yourself when you're a kid? I mean, you can make flip books, but pre-programs, you know, in like the early 90s or whatever, it's like, oh, you can make a comic. You can make it and it's
There's
done.
no 10-year-old drawing like 26 frames for
Yeah,
a second.
exactly. Yeah. So that's why I enjoy doing it. I don't really find any part of it difficult other than the money to schlep to all these shows, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think when I started, I was going to a lot of shows, and then money got tight. I think this is like post-pandemic. It got tight, so I stopped doing shows, and that's when I hooked up with Rat Nest to try to see if he could distribute these self-published comics to shops. People go to his shop to buy the books and whatnot, and it's not lucrative. It's been funny that he's like, dude, you have my full support to go and try to sell these, and then he contacts shops, and shops are like, no. They kind of like don't trust him to like if he's like moving my comics or whatnot, which it's pretty funny. But it ebbs and flows. And then the other thing of self-publishing is the next Starseeds book is going to be self-published in conjunction with Strangers Publishing, Strangers Magazine. I think Eddie he's a great guy. He has a love for comics, and in a conversation we had, I was like, I guess kind of going down in the little violin of how hard it is to make cash. And he's like, you make more money if you go to Kickstarter. You make more money if you don't. You do your own campaign. And I'm like, well, how much could I make if I did that? But I had you take care of the whole Kickstarter process, since I'd be a newbie to that. And he'd be like, he shared the info. I'm not gonna say it out, but it seems like, okay, that's more pliable economically than going to the traditional route. So I think from here on, I'm going to be self-publishing until I finish the story, and then hopefully Fantagraphics will still want me back and reprint those in larger volumes. But see, these are decisions I think you make because economically, going to like the traditional distribution and to publishers, there's a lot of money to feed. There's a lot of mouths to feed. So money goes everywhere. And I think the Kickstarter thing, or doing your campaign, there's more of a larger percentage going directly to the artist. And after this couple of months, I will let you guys know if that's successful or not.
I'm sure it will be.
Look forward to it.
So, while we have the audience still here, this YouTube channel is going to have a lot more indie content to it. I put a bunch of ideas together, and it turned out that Mikail had two, and it turned out that I flew out to San Diego right before Mikail told me about his ideas, so we got to talk about them in person. So, Sean, you are going to be hit up a lot and not thanking us for you coming on here. We're going to be thanking you a lot more. Scott Eder hopefully will be cooperating. Scott has helped me for 20 years, and maybe some people from the Beguiling. That used to be the site that I used to go to learn. And there's a lot of interesting other people in corners of this world that we want to cover regularly on the channel. I want to get that out of the way before I forgot, because that's very important. And Charles, before we forget as well, the Comic-Con Museum in San Diego. That show has already opened for you. Is that right? But it will continue through San Diego Comic-Con. So, for example, if we got a whole bunch of guys together and we sent you like a photo of what we look like, maybe you'll even show up and meet us there. Is that even a possibility? Put you on the spot?
I'm across the border in Tijuana, and all I need is 45 minutes to get up there.
Okay.
If you guys get a bunch of people and want to do something there, or want to go to like either just grab some coffee and have a talk about the work that's up there, I'm down. I mean, it's interesting. It would be interesting because it's like nobody knows how this stuff started, and it started as me trying to make art exhibitions where the exhibition was a chapter of this narrative, and people would go to the art exhibitions to see this narrative evolve. And 5 or 6 years, nobody knew what the hell I was doing. And that's when it's like, well, if my art is inspired by comics, then I should make them comics.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand the ambition, if you will, or the compulsion, but also that bound paper is easier for people than gigantic wall space. Yeah, Baron Story. If you don't know the work of Baron Story,
oh yeah, he was my instructor at school.
Come on.
Yeah, at CCA, California College of Arts.
Baron Story.
I love Baron Story. He's always like so intense.
We're definitely meeting up in San Diego. He's I love him as well. But you remember like Black Rock and like the exhibitions like that. You were supposed to walk through it. It was almost like an abomination that the pieces were even sold separately. It's but where's the space for it? How are you going to do it? And essentially, it came down to Carl Weikert making out of Belgium making the book. So I don't want to forget about that. And we have your email, and you're going to get an ask to meet up. That would be wonderful. And
that would be awesome.
I know that Sam. I saw that you even have pieces at Giant Robot in LA.
Yeah. I usually they have a monthly show there, or bi-monthly, and I anytime I can have time to contribute a piece, I do. And I think there's actually right now they're selling those cookie shirts, part of one of their shows. So.
Oh yeah, Dan's got to get a couple of those, and I know I want to make sure people know. I mean, Google these guys' names. Sam has a Patreon. Scumburbia. I know that there's pages of that. I think Sean, you have pages of that up, and one that I love on a hot summer's night. I like to eat my favorite cartoon characters.
That's funny. Yeah,
that's one of your zines. Yeah. Oh God, I love that. And there's a video too. I guess there's a in defense of ska video interview with you. So again, if people want to know more.
That's right.
Go to YouTube, and that's like the interview to watch because the other ones are shorter and.
Thanks. Yeah. And I'll also be at San Diego Comic Con, so I will definitely come. I'll be tabling there, and I'll also come see that exhibit, which I'm excited to see.
That's great.
Let's hook up, Sam. I know last year I was supposed to go to your table, but I couldn't make it.
For sure, no, that's fine. It was
me there. Hopefully cash in hand.
I love it.
Cool.
I love it. Gentlemen, other than wishing all of the mothers in your lives a happy Mother's Day, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? We good?
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
It was a pleasure, honestly.
I loved that. I loved it, and we'll do it much more often because I feel almost a feeling of anxiety. One of the operative words, Sean, that you used before was intimidated, and I know that, like, even as much as I've given a shit about these different corners of the comic art world, just taking a few years off and coming back in, I look at like everything that's out and like all the suggestions from Mikail, and I start hyperventilating. But there's a chasm that forms. I'm just being honest, I mean? I want to think about of that inhibition or that chasm or that little bit of intimidation, or I want that excitement to be directed rather than to hinder someone or for them to feel like they're drowning. And guides
Mhm.
the simple solution for that. Yeah.
Curating. Yeah. I mean, I think, Athenaeum's a great place for folks to start, of course. But a lot of the hobby, I think, is built off of nostalgia, right? People kind of looking at the things that they loved as a kid and wanting to own it, right? That's sort of the appeal, the aura of the original, right? This is the only one. I'm still that obnoxious person that will walk someone through a comic shop and be like, look at that book. I have a page from it, and they look blankly at me and don't care. I think one way to think about it perhaps is remembering what it was like when you first got a comic that you thought was yours, right? That you really connected with, that moment of, maybe this is, I'm the only one that knows this exists. You can do that in the indie space and feel like a kid again, right? Finding these books that are so powerful, that are doing interesting things. And for me, a lot of the hunt is that excitement of like chasing that high, that first high of like what I loved about comic books, and being able to just find these things that exist that maybe certain, circles of folks know about it, but a lot of folks don't. And being able to say, hey, here's a Sam Grinberg book that I love, Pancake Jake, that I put in the chat here, which I adore, is in Rust Belt Review, an anthology, and it's a growing anthology, but it's still kind of this special thing, I think. And there's a lot of excitement to that, and just kind of breaking the mold a little bit, and I feel like I want to continue to evolve as a reader, and I want to continue to kind of push myself to try new things. Not everything, I God knows I don't connect with everything in the indie comic space. But when you do find something, it's really a rewarding experience.
Yeah. All of that is perfect. The war cry portion of my programming is that pop culture has become so oppressive, omnipresent, exhaustive, and oxygen consuming that basically nostalgia has stunted aspirational portions of human beings. And that's the sort of grandiose war part of the programming, as I'll call it. I'm pretty pissed off about that.
I mean, it's always there. I mean, it's just, you just have to look for it, right? Even music or any medium really. When they're, I grew up during the boy band era of music, right, in the 90s, and I hated it at the time. Now I'm okay with it, but at the time I hated it. There was all sorts of stuff underneath the surface, and I think just taking the extra step, the extra Google, the following some of these folks. That's how I discovered Sam. I don't even remember. Like, I just saw someone shared a piece of your art. Yeah, it's just Instagram. Yeah. I think like immediately, and I tend to be someone who reaches out to artists that I love, just even to say, even before Athenaeum, just to be like, this page is amazing. This page is gorgeous. I just want you to know that, right? And I think, just keeping your eye open and following folks, it's sort of like, I don't know, back in the day, like before the internet was as big as it is, right? You would just find something and you would dive into it, and you would find the references and the inspiration, right? You'd read magazines and interviews with folks, and you'd say, okay, so this person was inspired by Kirby. Who is Kirby, right? Like, I think that's what's exciting to me. It brings me back to a space where you had to work a little bit to figure it out, but the end result was really exciting. So I get your point about this kind of landscape of oversaturation, and I think big media doesn't want to take a lot of risk.
Insidious tactics. People reared on them, never knowing anything different.
Exactly. But I think that there's a subversive element still that's happening underneath it, and
the human spirit. Yeah.
What are kids? I mean, kids are reading manga now, but they're not necessarily reading comic book superhero comic books anymore, right? They're
Right.
finding comics in different spaces. And so I have a lot of hope. I was just talking about this
Oh, yeah.
weekend. I am super pessimistic about the world in general. Like, I think we're all like doomed. But in comics, I'm like, yes, like I can see a future, you know, like a bright future. I think, you
We're
know,
close. Yeah,
the
we're
audience
close.
is endless. It's such a small, when you think about it compared to film, right? The audience of comics, there's so much more. There's so many more people that could be reading these books. So that's where I get a lot of my passion and excitement about it. Is for me, if I was a 14-year-old and you showed me some of the books, Sam or Charles books, you know, I had no idea that any of this existed when I was a kid, and it would have blown my mind, and I would have gone crazy. I would have bought everything from these two, you know. And I think that's part of the journey, you know. Part of the mission of this is to get more readers, to get a larger audience, you know.
Yeah. Yep, and for us not to feel like snobs when we read content like this.
Sure.
Thank you, thank you all. Thank you. That was an awesome way to
Thank you.
end Comic Art Live, and
Thank you guys.
thank you for letting me drop like a little bit of a bomb. I know you probably have so much to say, all of you, and just we wrapped that up pretty well. Thank you for letting me do that. And I'm going to end the stream. Guys, don't drop off. Just to say bye to you backstage. But thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.